The Zimbabwe gold or ZiG currency is the sixth attempt by the country to stabilize our economy in various ways. We've come a long way, and with the ZiG, there seems to be some form of stability. And that is what we're going to be discussing today. Where is this stability coming from? Is it sustainable? Is it going to last for a long time? My name is John Masugu, and I welcome you to Economic Forum, a program that brings you different topics about issues to do with agriculture, with mining, with tourism, and many facets of life to see how they affect our economy in Zimbabwe. And to discuss ZiG, its availability, non-availability, pricing, stability, and other things, is a banker who is actually an economist but working in the banking field, and that's Latifa Kassim. Welcome to Economic Forum.
Thank you very much for the welcome.
What have the monetary authorities done in order to come up with this stability that we are seeing? Yes, in the past we saw some stability in some instances, and then thereafter, it disappeared. So, but this time around, what magic did Governor John Mshiavani bring?
Yeah, thank you for that question. And I will attempt to answer it, also bearing in mind that the ZiG currency was introduced only in April. And in the few months that it's been in existence, indeed, we've seen some positive impact on the economy. We've seen, I think one of the major indicators that you could look at is the inflation rate. We've seen it relatively stable. In June, 0% month on month for ZiG, reflecting that prices in that currency did not change from May, which in fact had declined by minus 2.4%. I think that was very, very positive for the economy. When you look at the ZiG currency, first of all, I believe that maybe Zimbabweans themselves were looking for a currency that had more stability. So the introduction of this and the way it was introduced, even the new governor, when he came in driving for stability of this currency. His tone was also that he was going to support the strength of this currency and the stability thereof. So that in itself might be why we are seeing the ZiG being widely accepted. We've also seen a lot of conversations around industry. I mean, I do participate in some industry bodies, and in those conversations, we are seeing encouragement to accept the ZiG and to allow it to perform, or to allow it at least to be a better currency than what we've seen previously. And the way that can happen is by it being accepted by businesses also allowing policy to take effect. For example, where we've seen an encouragement to have multi-currency pricing alongside the US dollar, the ZiG needs to be priced. The effect of the pricing itself, where we are seeing encouragement that the pricing must be standardized, where price discovery is taking place on the willing buyer, willing seller platform, and that mid-rate being, or the rate at which businesses are buying it, being used then to price their products. So again, you are seeing some form of stability in that respect. We'll
talk more about pricing, but when the currency was introduced, we were shown the vaults at the Reserve Bank. We were told that the currency is backed by gold and other precious minerals, as well as our foreign currency reserves. If you could just explain that so that we all fully understand what that means. For the
ZiG cash that was printed, we were advised that there is, in fact, we saw the gold in the vault, and we're advised that there's foreign currency which is backing that currency. Ideally, when a currency is backed by something, in this case a commodity and real currency, it should tend to follow the price of that. So if I've got one ZiG and it's backed by gold, then ideally it should be following the price of gold. I think when we started, one ZiG was equals to 13.56 US dollars, and we've seen the trend relatively stable. And this is because if you also look at the trend of the basket at which it is pegged, it has also remained relatively stable. So, in essence, if a currency is pegged to anything, it will follow that peg. In this case, our ZiG is following the peg which it has, which is the basket of commodities and currencies. In fact, if you recall, the ZiG that was introduced was way below the amount of commodity that we had available. So that means we should see it being relatively stable in terms of its peg.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. History records that in the past we've seen this kind of stability, and then it is waned as time goes on. The introduction of the auction system being one such example. But is there confidence all over from individual, corporates, and even investors that ZiG is here to stay in that or at that level of stability?
So I'd like to say, like in economics, we always say we should have necessary and sufficient conditions for something to hold. In this instance, for the ZiG to remain stable, it is necessary that businesses accept the currency. It is necessary that confidence around that currency improves. So as long as sentiment towards ZiG remains positive, I believe that the currency is going to hold. It's also, like I said, unfortunately no glass ball for us to see into the future, but that necessary condition needs to hold for businesses to accept it and for individuals also to accept that ZiG, as per the policymakers and whatever they're doing in the background, is going to take effect, and this ZiG is going to be strong into the future.
That's Latifa Kassim, who is our guest today. We are discussing the Zimbabwe gold currency, which is known as ZiG, which seems to have stabilized over many months since it was introduced by the governor of the Reserve Bank of Zimbabwe, Dr. John Mshavanu, in April. So join us in the second segment of Economic Forum. We now want to look at how Zimbabwe Gold or ZiG has addressed some of the issues that have been a worry to the monetary authorities over many years. And it's an economic forum with our guest here, who is Latifa Kassim, a banker and economist as well. Latifa, let's look at how so far, we keep on saying so far because we'll see what will happen judging from April to wherever we'll be as far as the progress and the stability of the ZiG is concerned. Exchange rate volatility, is that something that is making people spend sleepless nights?
So if you look at the exchange rate trends since the introduction of the ZiG, when you look at ZiG US dollar ZiG pair, you'll find that it has been relatively stable around the 13-14 mark, and its stability is largely attributed to, as we discussed earlier, the peg, the basket at which the currency is pegged against, and also a lot of efforts that have been put, I think, by policymakers to try and ensure that that the ZiG remains stable. I think from the banking sector, what we have seen is the willing buyer, willing seller platform take effect with customers or corporates being able to purchase foreign currency from this platform for their day-to-day use. I think one thing we also need to take cognizance of is the fact that the economy, even after the introduction of ZiG, has remained largely dollarized. So you would not really expect the ZiG to weaken, because there's a lot of US dollars in circulation in the country, and a lot of the trades or a lot of the transactions are still being undertaken in US dollar. So it gives you a good balance in terms of the value of the ZiG. I think continued efforts by policymakers to ensure that money supply remains controlled. Of course, because government needs to continue doing its programs, we're expecting an influx of ZIG, but we do expect also the Reserve Bank to continue mopping up this excess ZIG through its instruments that are at its disposal. And I think currently they have the non-negotiable certificates of deposits, which is your NNCDs, which are in use. And it's these NNCDs that are then used to mop up currency, and in so mopping up, they also reflect in the stability of the ZIG. So I think a lot of things need to talk to each other, both on the fiscal and on the monetary space, for this currency to remain stable.
Confidence is something that you express, that we should also express that confidence in our own currency.
Definitely. We need to give the currency a chance. And like I said earlier, I was happy to see that already members of the corporate world have accepted and embraced the currency, and it's left to everybody else to embrace it, because without confidence it's easy for us to just shun the currency before we give it a chance. And so we need to give it a chance.
How about the inflation figures? Have they been looking good starting from April, from the introduction of the ZIG?
I would like to say so. I think like June gave as a 0% month-on-month inflation for ZIG, May minus 2.4%, showing that prices actually dipped in May in ZIG terms. This is very good. This shows that to some extent ZIG has kept prices relatively stable. The time frame we're looking at might be too short, but when you do look at the policymakers' view, is that inflation should be 5%, at least 5% by year end, and that's single digit. Also a very good rate to target, and if we are to achieve it, it does show that it would show that the economy is on the right trajectory. What's left is to see what the policymakers have in store to ensure that we keep that rate as low as possible.
Would it be an overstatement to say, finally our economy has restored macro, economic fundamentals per se?
From what we are seeing a move in the right direction. And of course, I would like to provide that encouragement to say, let's keep moving in that direction. Let's keep doing what we're doing correctly. Let's keep doing that. It's too soon to say we are there. There's a lot of more things that need to happen. There's a lot. We now need to have a statutory instrument in place to allow taxes to be paid in ZIG, so that we increase the use of that currency and the acceptability of that currency. Because as long as there is no acceptable use of the ZIG, you'll find more people wanting to use the US dollar.
While saying that, Latifa, is it available? Is it easily accessible? I know you're a banker as well as an economist, and you sit on various fora, including the Treasurer's one at the Bankers Association of Zimbabwe. What is the public saying about its availability? At times we hear people moaning about change, in the shops and so forth.
Well, the way I look at it, we've got access to our ZIG by using cards. If you need to purchase, you can swipe. I think where our main challenge is change in the public transport. And from a banking perspective, we've seen the Reserve Bank provide notes and coins to the banks. So maybe it's about how do those notes and coins now start circulating in the economy so that everybody has access to them. But so far we have seen availability of these notes and coins to the banking sector.
Well, that's Latifa Kassim, who is our guest today. We are discussing Zimbabwe gold, or the ZIG currency, especially the move towards stability that we've seen from the time it was launched in April by the governor of the Reserve Bank of Zimbabwe, Dr. John Mshavano. So join us in the third and final segment of Economic Forum. Having discussed some of the positive aspects regarding the stability of Zimbabwe gold or the ZiG currency. We also want to look at some of the impediments that might bring down ZiG. There are many risk factors like climate and other things. Would you explain how this can be dealt with?
The risk factors to the stability of the ZiG remain. This year we've been talking about the El Nino, impact of drought. Maybe there's going to be need to, we might have a bad agri season, which may lead to us having to import maize and other commodities to support the economy. This might also then lead to government having to print. So we know that whenever there's an injection of that domestic currency, it impacts the stability. So how is it that government is going to respond, or the Reserve Bank is going to respond to the excess currency that's being printed? We are also seeing some government projects taking place, which we believe could lead to printing of currency so they can pay their contractors. Again, what is the impact of this? When you look at it holistically, again, it talks to the Reserve Bank. They need to mop up whenever there's excess funds that are printed. Obviously, an economy can't grow without there being any injection of currency. But it's how do we respond to that injection? I think government, in terms of its projects, needs to find other ways to pay, even to stagger payments where possible, to pay in other forms, whether it's some form of structured finance or pay using land or other instruments, so that there's not too much pressure on the fiscus and then on the monetary system as well. Informality is big for this economy. We've noted that most of trades on the informal sector take place in US dollar. How do we get them to accept the ZiG currency? And again, I think through time, it's only been 3 months since the introduction. So through time, as they see the formal sector accepting this ZiG, it will then translate into the informal sector as well, accepting it. And as more and more domestic transactions take place in ZiG, they will also be forced then to come into that formal economy and start using that currency. But again, it's an issue of confidence, which we need to build by having consistent policies in place.
What is it that you would recommend going forward so that ZiG remains stable?
For a currency to remain in effect in a country, we've seen it in Zimbabwe over time, it has to be accepted and widely accepted by the people who use it. How do we get Zimbabweans to accept the ZiG? I think the ZiG should start being accepted at our filling stations. We should start accepting it for things like passport payments, and that would increase confidence. How do we do that? I think through time, policymakers now need to allow leeway. If there's a need, for example, I know that passports, the paper required to print the passport might be imported, then maybe we should be able to allow individuals to access foreign currency to pay for their passports from the banks. For those services that you really think need foreign currency. Let's find a way to allow access of foreign currency. Or as we go along, for example, when you talk about fuel, purchasing of fuel, if we are allowed to buy fuel from the filling station, then those filling stations should be allowed then to access foreign currency from the bank so that they can import the fuel to service the economy. I think that would really go a long way in supporting the acceptability of the ZiG. Furthermore, again, policy interventions around printing of ZiG, this needs to be as minimal as possible. I think we've seen already a move away from quasi-fiscal activities of the central bank, which is a plus, and we should not see those in the near future. This will also improve confidence in the currency and maybe medium to long run see more uptake from individuals and more confidence being built around this currency. I'd like also to talk about how we've seen the IMF come in through their staff monitored program. The fact that they're still in this country shows that they've got confidence that our policymakers are willing to make the necessary changes to make this currency work. Importantly is exchange rates. How do we ensure that the exchange rate reflects the dynamics on the ground? Is the price discovery correct? Are we ensuring that there's limited intervention in terms of pricing of the currency so that the market remains confident? And again, are we improving accessibility of foreign currency, even for our importing corporates who need the raw materials? So again, it's talking about policy interventions around import substitution and export orientation, where we encourage our companies to export more, put in measures that increase exports so that we see the foreign currency come through. Because why I'm saying exports is through the 25% surrender amounts, that's where we find the foreign currency being pumped back into the economy. So that 25% needs to grow. How do we make it grow? So I think that among other measures, should assist.
Yes, and the growth of our industries, and how does all this assist? Does the ZIG play a part? Because we are being encouraged to actually be manufacturers and to also beneficiate and do things that don't take away our money outside the country. Would that be one of your recommendations to improve in that way? Hey, considering that we are also going big time in innovation.
Yes, I think a domestic currency is very important to the growth of any economy. Look, if we keep on depending on external currencies, the things we can't control, we are sometimes left, what do they call it, as lying dogs, where things just happen to us when things in those other countries take place. So it's better to have control. It also helps us maybe in terms of our cost of production, which in effect then, if it's low, encourages growth in industry. So I think any country needs to have its domestic currency. We need to encourage that. We need to ensure that even for industry growth, we should be using our domestic currency. And I must say, again, through my participation with some industry bodies, many of these corporates are actually accepting the ZIG and feeling that it's important that they have the ZIG being a successfully run currency. And I think policymakers only need to support this for it to happen.
What remains is for me to thank you, Latifa Kassim, for coming on to Economic Forum. That was our guest, who is a banker and an economist. We're talking about the seeming stability of the ZIG, how far it can go, and how our own confidence as citizens can also help the monetary authorities to strengthen the ZIG in various ways. If you would like to get in touch with us on this program, you can do so on the numbers that are showing on your screen. If you would like to engage with us, including issues that Latifa Kassim has been talking about, you can also do that on our social media platforms that again are showing on your screens. If you miss some of the episodes of Economic Forum, you can actually watch them on our YouTube channel, which is Economic Forum Zimbabwe. So on behalf of Latifa Kassim, our guest, and the production team, this is John Masubu wishing you happy viewing.